You're at the meeting where we talk about what it is, why it is, what's the value to the member, what's the risk, what's the return. And so we're basically reteaching ourselves, how do you deliver a thing and not just deliver it into market, but deliver the expected outcome. And so for us, that is where we spend a ton of energy because that's what our members demand. And so that's where for us, the most value is created by making sure we know what we're doing.
Growing a financial institution to the next level isn't just about getting bigger, it's about transforming the entire organization. Today, we're talking with Kevin Miller, CEO of Travis Credit Union, who found himself in a leader's dream scenario: a clear mandate for change, a supportive board, and the resources to execute. He shares his playbook for taking the $5 billion institution to the next level, including what's worked, what hasn't, and the lessons learned along the way. Kevin, thank you very much for being with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure to join you today.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and kind of what brought you to Travis Credit Union? You've been in the role about 2.5 years now, and we can kind of talk about what sets you up for the kind of path you're on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been very fortunate career-wise. Prior to joining Travis, I did a role at a consumer lending fintech focused on helping those with troubled credit figure out a path forward. And then predominantly prior to that, I worked for both the national and regional banks in kind of technical roles, and then got to run a large line of business. So the role at Travis is kind of the culmination of all of those career experiences.
So first time CEO for institution. Travis is what, about 5 billion, a little more than 5 billion in
A little
assets?
over 5 billion, yeah.
And your AO is it's Northern California, right? Kind of between the Bay Area and Sacramento
Absolutely,
along
yes.
I-80, right? Like that's your
Yep,
area.
that's right.
Okay. So you get this new role in 2022. What's the mandate? What is the board telling you? Like, this is the reason why we brought you in to do this.
Yep. So it was kind of because concentric rings of our mission's not negotiable, s- and we know we want to grow, and then we know probably while we're growing we need to transform. So really the ask was, what is the next evolution of Travis Credit Union, and how, where are we today and how do we get there? And so that's what we've been doing over the last 2.5 years, is kind of getting the interior wiring and the plumbing of the house or the building kind of rebuilt. It'll take another year or two. At the meantime, we're still focused on serving members and growing, but it's kind of a fun transformation story.
So is this primarily like digital transformation, or is it like, hey, everything is game here?
Everything. So across the traditional buckets, as you think about a transformation project, it's people, process, and technology, or now they call it platforms. But it really is around, first, what's the broader objective? So do we have clear alignment? That it's, do you have the right people in the right roles? And then it's kind of what's process and then technology. And so we've been kind of started with people, doing a lot of work on process, and then doing, capability changes in technology. Some that our members don't see, and some obviously very much so they feel in terms of a better experience.
So as a leader, kind of with this mandate and coming in as an outsider, what was your approach to this, and maybe kind of what were the lessons learned? What worked for you, and maybe what you wish you maybe had done different or taken a different approach on?
Absolutely. So, um, when I join an organization or take on a new role, part of my onboarding approach is I ask everybody the same three questions: what's going well, what's not going well, and if I had a magic fairy wand and could change one thing about the organization, what would it be? And so, and when I onboarded in the case of Travis, I had, 40 one-on-ones in the first 30 days, and I captured those notes from each person. And what that does is that drives what you focus on at the beginning. So you listen to, in my case, the more senior leaders of Travis plus our frontline team members, and you talk to the board. And what you find is, what are those common themes of, and some are low hanging fruit, some are really big things that are going to take time. And so really the goal was, when you're new to an organization and new in this role, it's really kind of gaining mutual alignment on what is it we're working on and negotiating for success to have capacity to be able to drive change. And so that's kind of how I think about tackling it. And so if you have a framework for doing that, the situation you're facing will be different in every single role or job, but you gotta have a methodology, or else all you're doing is you're trying to chase kind of shiny objects. So to your broader question, you know, how did that go? Overall, pretty well. Are there things I would have done different? You better believe it, right? There's always things in hindsight that you thought you knew, or you knew, but when you got the time to address it, in hindsight, you would have done it sooner. And so for me, it's always my litmus test is, are we making forward progress? So are we better today than I was yesterday? And if that's the case, you will never not be successful, because that small wins lead to medium wins, lead to large wins. And so what we've really focused on is, outside of regulatory items, which we are very little tolerance for not adherence, everything else is workable. So, like, let's worry less about perfection and more of improving capabilities, improve experiences for our members and services, and the rest kind of works itself out. And so, you don't always know the end in mind, but once you start the process, you kind of begin to navigate your way through.
Was there? I guess there's always like this difference between, are you in a turnaround or are you in a realignment?
Yeah.
And it always seems like the difference is how much runway do you have? Like, how much time do you have? Turnaround is like, man, 30 days, like,
Yep.
you gotta right the ship and be going in the right. It doesn't sound like that was really the situation, but there was a change mandate. Like, this is
Yeah.
I'm here to create a new strategy for what we're doing. Is that a fair assessment?
It is. And what you find in any job is, if you use the STARS methodology or whatever it is, there are going to be certain situations that are turnarounds. So the broader bucket is transformation, but there are going to be situations you run into, which is, whoa, this is maybe farther out of alignment of my expectation or of our strategy. And so that's going to require a very quick pivot to go tackle, versus some things, to your point, we may not get to for 2 years. And that's kind of one of the natures of the role that I think people find interesting is, you will know things just like you do. And there'll be things on your mind that should be different. It may take you years to get there, but you've got to find this balance of long term, midterm, and short term. And you can't tackle everything at one time. And so it's really this constant game or constant shifting of priorities based on member needs, the economic environment, just kind of where we are in the journey. So that's kind of what we're doing, is constantly kind of pivoting or tweaking the dial to make sure that we're delivering on the mission at the same time, kind of, building an organization for the future.
So how much of this was kind of inside versus outside? You always trying to balance the two and kind of wearing the
Yeah.
hats of looking at the market, where the opportunity is, where maybe the uniqueness to your market, the missed opportunity, or where really you could take advantage of something, versus the inside of looking at the capabilities you have, core competence, like where you can go. That kind of like trying to balance those two things together. In this situation, what did you see was the bigger levers, the thing that you wanted to address first?
Yep. Internal. So oftentimes when you're looking at organizations going through transformation, um, I often use the analogy of like college level courses. So intellectually, I want to be doing that 404 level college class, but actually I need to master the 101 level. And so oftentimes when organizations, Travis being a good example, great brand, great history, great experience, but as you grow, what works at one size doesn't always work at the next size. And so what you find is that you start to experience pressure and strains on delivering that kind of stellar member experience when you've gone from, in our case, $1 billion to 5 billion. And so it's a pretty natural thing. They call it the S curve, right? With corporations or companies. And so that for us is the same thing. So yes, we want to know what's happening in the competitive environment, but really, when you look at what we want to deliver, it's all about the internal, you know, and then yes, we might use external solutions, but it's almost predominantly for the first couple of years, all about getting our proverbial ducks in a row to deliver kind of a better outcome. And we're seeing the fruits of that, as we speak.
So did you have a vision in mind for like, hey, this is a benchmark for what we want to look like as a 5, 7, $10 billion organization? Or was it more discovery of like individual things? Like, was there a how crystal was that future vision, I guess? Like, did you like point to another institution and say we want to be like them? Or was it more, I guess, nebulous?
Yeah, so I would say this is the uniqueness of, I would particularly say, credit unions. So I think, yes, there are peer institutions that are larger that you look at in terms of understanding, for me, their business model. So how did they do it? Are there particular lines of business they're in or capabilities they offer their members? So I would say yes in that respect. The difference for a credit union is then the mission piece, which is a little bit different because if I try to do the same thing as somebody else, like my likelihood of success is not as high. So what we've been working on is, let's make sure we understand our capabilities against the peer set. Peer sets are national banks, fintechs, and credit unions. And so we're on that phase of things. The next phase we're working on starting next year is then, how do we uniquely deliver that value to our members and how do we measure that? But you can't get to that step until you're well on your journey of building out those fundamental capabilities to deliver that experience. So ultimately, yes, you want to be really competitive on capabilities and talent and processes. But then as a credit union, you get to decide at the direction of the board, how do we measure that? And what's more important or less important? And that's a little bit of the nuance, I would say, coming into a credit union that I really do like.
So, and to that point, this is your first credit union experience, right? As from a
Correct.
career standpoint. Okay. Um, on that point, how much of a transition was that for you? Like, what did you find was the hard part, or what made it work better for you? Kind of moving from essentially a for profit to a nonprofit organization, but like everything else that kind of comes into what makes a credit union unique and different.
Yeah, honestly, the transition into the credit union community, as they sometimes call it, pretty straightforward. People are very welcoming. So my peer credit, California has a very busy trade organization called the California Nevada League. Those credit union CEOs could not have been more helpful. Took time to meet. Here's what I've learned in my career. So from that perspective, really, really smooth. So I would say credit union learnings, not that was pretty straightforward. The thing that most people face when they're a first time CEO is working with and for a board. I'm really fortunate. Our board, highly engaged, really great to work with. But that's a different experience, right? You go from having one boss to a board. And so I would say for me, one of the really cool learning parts and growing for me is, how do you manage a board? And so doing lots of understanding of what are best practices and any tips and tricks from my peers. So I would say for me, that's been more of the evolution, the fundamentals of the business, very familiar to when I ran a retail bank.
And back to this transformation, this process that you went to. What did you end up doing, I guess, first, or the first couple of things, and why did you choose to start there?
Yeah, absolutely. So back to where we started and to where our team spoke the loudest. We call them team members, not employees, and our members. And so our number one, we had two large pieces of feedback when I joined Travis. First one was related to our digital or online and mobile experience. We were not where we needed to be. And the second one was we're having some performance issues in our call center or phone center where you call our team members. And so in the first year, what we decided to do was basically dig into both. So in 2023, we launched our new online banking mobile digital platform. Uh, you know, Meaningful up 10%, 10 percentage point uptick in terms of use. You know, the Apple Store ratings went up precipitously. And we delivered more capabilities to our members. So we saw a meaningful uptick in new members using it, but actually pretty cool. We saw a meaningful uptick in long-term Travis members who had never used our online experience. So basically that population that you often perceive won't do it. And then we followed up with a new online account opening platform here this summer, and that delivers 2.5x increase in conversion rate, 10% reduction in manual process. So better member experience and faster. That's kind of what our members ask for. So we're just kind of consistently working towards building capabilities. And what you see is goodness out of each of those. And that then corresponds into higher member experience scores, and we're growing. So our member growth is up.
So what part of that was, I guess, the hard part, or what was the most challenging thing from an organization? Because particularly when you're doing like technology implementations, yes, the tech can be hard and sometimes it's a skills issue, but it's usually more the friction within the organization of, you're changing how people do their jobs, whether that's a month, a year, a decade, right? And that can be the more difficult part. I mean, was that true for you, or what, from a an internal capability standpoint, what was really the part that you had to work the most at?
Yep. The area that we spend the most amount of time on, even still to this day, is, when you're a kid, you had to watch that video, How a Bill Becomes a Law, Mr. Bill on Capitol Hill. It's all about process. And so in the case of the digital experience, the big thing we did different in that project is we moved the majority of the vendor assessment, all of the key criteria, key capabilities before we signed the contract. So we did all of the work. So the time we signed the contract with the vendor, we were going right into development or partnership. And that's how you doesn't guarantee perfection. There's never perfection, but what it does is it pulls forward all of these conversations that you should be having versus historical model. You sign a contract and then you start digging into how things really work. So for us in that project, we pulled all of that pre-work forward. So we signed the contract, we went right into doing the work. And then since then, we've built out a enterprise-wide process that all initiatives have to go through. And to teach us a new way, every single one of those at different phases of the project goes in front of the executive team. So it does two things: consistency of process, and it lets our great leaders get highlighted in terms of the work they're doing, and it drives enterprise-wide accountability. Because you're at the meeting where we talk about what it is, why it is, what's the value to the member, what's the risk, what's the return. And so we're basically reteaching ourselves, how do you deliver a thing and not just deliver it into market, but deliver the expected outcome. And so for us, that is where we spend a ton of energy, because that's what our members demand. And so that's where for us, the most value is created by making sure we know what we're doing, we have a clean process to do it, and we deliver that capability and we deliver the end expectation.
So what changes did you have to make in the organization to do that? I mean, a lot of times there's a PMO office that typically sits under the CIO, and that, like, they kind of run the nuts and bolts of it. But if you're taking this forward into, procurement, now you're getting to other areas of the organization. Like, what really kind of
Yeah.
fundamental changes had to be made?
So let's go back to where we were able to show people what the art of the possible was. So when we did the online banking or digital capability change, for the first time, we had an enterprise-wide group of folks, not the first, but for a recent time, but everybody focused on this end outcome. And so that went really well. And what everybody remembered is, wow, I can't wait till we use something like that again. So that's a kind of a one and done. Then the question is, how do you systematize it? And that's where we actually had the teams in partnership with the PMO. We had the leaders of Travis co-create with their teams the process. We set the boundaries, created a work team, and said, how do you think we should work through these things? And so effective in 2024, all initiatives, regardless of what stage they were in, had to go through this process. And so it was bumpy at first, as is all change in life, but the goodness and the quality of the discussion, you could see people leaving those dialogues and saying, this is actually making us better. But again, it's all about the homework. Are we doing the homework and the pre-work so that when we get ready to do the big thing, we have really thought through it? And that, in essence, that will be a never ending objective for us, but that is where we're spending a tremendous amount of time.
So how much of that was a change from what had been the status quo? Was it more or less delegation? Was it, a skills issue that you had to address either from personnel or training standpoint? Like what was really what was the part that was going to be the friction for everybody involved?
Yeah. So if you've worked in other organizations before, you come with history and experience, some good and some not good about process. And so the credit union was no different. We had tried a variety of things. Um, and what we found is a one size fits all model had um, a history and a narrative around how it prohibited stuff from getting done. And so that was kind of, I think, for a lot of our longer tenured team members at Travis, their memory of process. And so what we needed to show everybody is if you can do things in bite-sized pieces and you can see outcomes and you can be recognized for, hey, I know that was bumpy, that was a great job. Let's move on to the next step. What we found is that as you put more interesting projects through it, so new phone system, new credit card offering, new mortgage platform, which are all all things that are happening right now, all of a sudden, A, you know what the rules of the road to be successful at the organization are. B, it actually helps you be better prepared to deliver the thing you're going to do. So with all things in life, it is in bite-sized pieces. You try something, you iterate, you get feedback, you iterate again, keep iterating, keep getting feedback. And what you find is you end up with a pretty good workable process that is great for us right now.
So you're about 2.5 years into your tenure. How how big is this, at least this phase of change? I mean, you're always going to be changing at some point, but at least kind of thinking through this transformation of we're prepared to be a $5 billion institution, or we're trying to, prepare to be a bigger one. How much more of this do you think you are? Is this like almost done, or we're getting into another phase, or where do you think you're
Yeah.
going?
Great question. So, as with all things in life, just when you think you're going to wrap up one thing, the next thing happens. So, I would say the core capability component, the foundational work by the end of 2026 will be done. At the same time, the regulatory environment changes as we get bigger, and there's actually a readiness process you have to do for that. So it's tied to a $10 billion asset size. We're not hung up on achieving 10 billion for the sake of 10 billion. It's really around if we deliver value for our members, we'll grow, and one day we'll get there. So we will begin the assessment process for what's required to effectively govern and manage 10 billion next year. And so that'll drive a 3 to 4 year cycle of work to make sure that we are ready for the day when we are larger and the expectations of the credit union change. So I would think about them as we'll have some overlapping swim lanes, but they're all interrelated because they're all about, making sure that we maintain trust with our members and that we have the right capabilities and controls as you get bigger and bigger and more distributed.
And uh, that growth plan, from what you see, is that all planned to be organic, or are you looking at M&A, or, other types of transactions to do that?
Yep. So the board approved effective this year a 5 year plan, really focused on organic growth, really centered around driving kind of member growth and engagement. In addition, we did build for the organization an M&A or inorganic uh, basically playbook. And so I will say, we have the capability to do that when it is in the best interest of our members and the communities we serve. So, we serve Northern California. We'll finish the year at about 260,000 members. We'll deliver this year alone, we'll deliver, 30 plus $1 million in kind of deliver $30 million of value to our members by better prices, better fees. So for us, it's like if we can do more of that and gain appropriate scale so we can deliver more value, reinvest with size into more capabilities, that is of interest to the organization, but it's not inorganic growth for the sake of inorganic growth.
Well, Kevin, this has been A fascinating story. Thank you very much for coming on and kind of sharing lots of really good lessons in here. If people are interested in learning more about Travis or you, where can they go?
Sure. Our Travis Credit Union, so it's traviscu.org is our website. So feel free to reach out. And they're also welcome to reach out to me over LinkedIn or one of those. And always happy to chat. Love to hear from great people and great thinkers.
And we'll have links to both in the show notes. Kevin, thanks again for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.